Our destiny changes with our thoughts. We shall become what we wish to become, do what we wish to do, when our habitual thoughts correspond with our desires. That's a quote from Orison Swett Marden, the founder of Success Magazine many years ago. Your ability to speak to an audience is essential to your success. Speaking well can garner the respect and esteem of others, make you more valuable to your company, and get attention from people who can help you and open doors for you. Good speaking ability will also convince people that you are generally more talented and intelligent than others who do not speak as well. What is your most valuable asset? Your mind. One of the most precious skills you have is your ability to think well and to express yourself clearly. This skill can help you earn more money and get promoted faster as much as any other talent you can develop. After all, the only way you can demonstrate your mastery of a subject is by expressing your thoughts and ideas clearly aloud and in writing. When you speak well, people say, "He really knows what he's talking about." The good news is that your mind is like a muscle. It grows stronger and more capable with use. Organizing your thoughts and words in advance makes you more alert and aware of what you are saying and how you are saying it. The act of planning, preparing, and delivering talks and presentations forces you to use your mind at a higher level, and it actually makes you smarter. Eliminate your fear and turbocharge your career. Some years ago, I gave a one-day seminar on executive effectiveness to a group of business people. During the talk, I emphasized the importance of being able to speak well and influence people in business. At the end of the day, a somewhat shy businessman came up to me and told me that as a result of my comments, he had decided that he was going to learn how to be a good speaker. He was tired of being ignored by his supervisors and passed over for promotions. A year later, I received a letter from him telling me his story. He had immediately taken action on his resolution. He joined a local chapter of Toastmasters and began attending weekly meetings. At each meeting, each member was required to stand up and speak on some subject, and each person was given a grade at the end of the meeting. Toastmasters uses the process of what is called systematic desensitization. This means that if you do something over and over, you finally become desensitized to it. When you speak repeatedly in front of others, you eventually lose your fears and misgivings. He also took a Dale Carnegie course for 14 weeks. At each session, he was required to speak in front of his peers. Within 6 months, he had given so many long and short presentations to friendly groups of peers that most of his fear and anxiety about speaking was gone. In its place was a growing confidence in his ability to express himself to an audience. At about this time in his growth and development, there was a small emergency at his engineering firm. One of the partners had been scheduled to give a presentation to the members of a client company. But the partner was ill and unable to make the meeting. The businessman's boss asked him if he would prepare and present the company's proposal instead. He, a little bit cautiously, accepted the assignment. He prepared thoroughly throughout the evening and the following morning. He then went to the client's office, made an excellent presentation for the firm's services, and got the business. When he returned to the office, his boss told him that the president of the prospective client had called and thanked him for sending someone to give such an excellent presentation of the firm's services. Within a few weeks, he was being sent out regularly to call on the firm's prospects and clients. He was promoted and then promoted again. Soon he was a member of senior management and on his way to becoming a partner. He told me that his whole life changed by making a decision to become a good speaker and then following up that decision with specific actions. Increase your self-esteem. Becoming an excellent public speaker will help you in every part of your career. But there is an even more important reason to learn to speak well to an audience. Psychologists tell us that your level of self-esteem, or how much you like yourself, largely determines the quality of your inner and outer life. The better and more persuasively you speak, the more you like yourself. The more you like yourself, the more optimistic and confident you are. The more you like yourself, the more positive and personable you are in your relationships with others. The more you like yourself, the healthier, happier, and more positive you become in everything you do. Improve your self-image. When you learn to speak effectively, your self-image improves as well. Your self-image is called your inner mirror. It is the way you see yourself and think about yourself prior to and during any event. The more positive your self-image, the more competent your performance. The very act of visualizing yourself performing at your best prior to any event or activity will improve your performance in that event or activity. We are all highly sensitive to the thoughts, feelings, and especially the respect of others. Somerset Maugham once wrote, "Everything we do in life is to earn the respect of others, or, at the very least, not to lose their respect." So when you speak well, your audience likes and respects you more. As a result, you like and respect yourself more as well. When you get positive feedback from others as a result of speaking well, your self-image improves. You see yourself and think about yourself in a more positive way. You develop a greater sense of personal power. You walk, talk, and act with greater confidence. Excellent speaking is learnable. Perhaps the best news about speaking to groups is that it is a learnable skill. Most people who are competent speakers today at one time could not lead silent prayer in a phone booth. Many people who appear confident and articulate in front of an audience were at one time terrified at the idea of standing up and speaking in public. Your goal should be to be in the top 10% of communicators, and you should continually remind yourself that almost everyone who is in the top 10% today started in the bottom 10%. Everyone who is doing well was once doing poorly. As Harv Eker says, every master was once a disaster. You've probably heard it said that practice makes perfect. Some people go even further and say that perfect practice makes perfect. However, the truth is that imperfect practice makes perfect. On your journey to mastering the art of speaking to an audience, you will make many small and large mistakes. You will often feel nervous and inadequate. You will say the wrong things and forget to say the right things. You will mumble and stumble and wonder if you'll ever get it right. Move out of your comfort zone. But in order to achieve excellence in speaking or in any field, you must be willing to move out of your comfort zone and into your discomfort zone. You must be willing to feel clumsy and awkward during your growth and development if you're ever going to move to a higher level of competence. You may remember the story of the famous Greek orator Demosthenes, considered one of the finest speakers of antiquity. When he began, he was nervous, shy, and troubled by both a stutter and a speech impediment. But he was determined to be a good speaker. To overcome his difficulties, he put pebbles in his mouth and spoke loudly to the sea for hours every day. In time, he eliminated his stutter and overcame his speech impediment. His voice grew louder, stronger, and more confident. He became one of the greatest orators in history. If you are a beginning speaker, this book will show you how to accelerate the process of speaking with competence, confidence, and clarity. If you are a more experienced speaker, this book will give you some of the most powerful techniques, tactics, and methods of great speakers in every area of business, politics, and personal life. There are 4 Ds to speaking excellence. To become an outstanding speaker, you simply must have the 4 Ds. Number 1, desire. First, you must have an intense, burning desire to speak well. If your desire is strong enough and you want to achieve speaking mastery long enough, nothing can stop you from reaching your goal. But desire, by itself, is not enough. The second D that you require is decision. You must make a decision this very day that you are going to make every effort, overcome any obstacle, and do whatever it takes to become excellent. The third D is discipline. You must have the discipline to plan, prepare, and deliver talks and presentations over and over again until you achieve mastery. There are no shortcuts to hard work in developing an essential skill. And the final D is determination. You must have the determination to persist and persevere in spite of any short-term setback, obstacle, or embarrassment that you might experience. The only limit is you. Our greatest enemies are always our own doubts and fears. But there are no limits to what you can do, be, or have, except for the limits you place on yourself. Over the years, I have delivered more than 4,000 presentations and spoken personally to more than 5 million people in 46 countries. In the pages ahead, I will take you by the hand and show you step by step how to develop the courage, confidence, and competence to be a winning speaker in any situation. Chapter 1. The Arts of Speaking and Rhetoric. All his oratorical efforts were made for practical effect. He never spoke merely to be heard. By Abraham Lincoln. Throughout history, the height of human effectiveness has been the ability to persuade others. As such, the aim or goal of public speaking is to cause an action to take place that would not have taken place in the absence of the words of the speaker. For example, when Demosthenes spoke, people said, "What a fine speaker he is." But when Alcibiades spoke, they said, "Let us march." Your job as a speaker is to motivate and impel your listeners to think, feel, and act differently as the result of your words. It is to make them take action of some kind. It is to motivate them to march. Fortunately, becoming a master speaker and business communicator is a learnable skill. If you can learn how to drive a car, type on a keyboard, or use a cell phone, you can become an effective speaker and change not only your life, but the lives of your listeners. There are 3 elements of persuasion. Aristotle was the first major philosopher to recognize the importance of rhetoric as an essential tool of the leader. He broke down the essential elements of persuasion into 3 parts: logos, logic; ethos, ethics; and pathos, emotion. Let's take each of them in turn. Logos refers to the logic, the words, and the reasons in your argument. It's important that everything that you say fits together like links in a chain or pieces of a jigsaw puzzle to form a coherent statement or argument. When you think through and plan your talk, you organize your various points in a sequence, from the general to the particular, from the start to the conclusion, with each point building on each previous point to form a persuasive argument. The second aspect of persuasion is ethos. This refers to your character, ethics, and your believability when you speak. Increasing your credibility with your audience before and during your speech increases the likelihood that listeners will accept your arguments and take action on your recommendations. The third aspect of persuasion is pathos. This is the emotional content of your argument and is perhaps the most important. It is only when you connect emotionally and move people at a fundamental level that you can motivate them to change their thinking and take a particular action. All 3 elements, logos, ethos, and pathos, must be woven together if you want to move people and persuade them to your point of view. The 3 components of your message. Albert Mehrabian of UCLA conducted a series of studies into effective communication some years ago. He concluded that there are 3 components of any spoken message: the words, the tone of voice, and the speaker's body language. Surprisingly, according to Mehrabian, the words count for only 7% of the message conveyed. Of course, the words you use are vitally important and must be selected with care. They must be organized in a proper sequence and be grammatically correct. But everyone has heard a boring academic speaker whose words were brilliant, but whose message fell flat. The words alone are not enough. The second element of communication that Mehrabian identified was the tone of voice. In his calculation, 38% of the message is contained in the speaker's tonality and emphasis on various words. Recite the sentence, "I love you very much." By putting the emphasis on any one of those words, or by making the sentence a question rather than a statement, you can change the entire meaning of the sentence. Try it. Here's an example. I love you very much. 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 In any case, the tonality totally changes the meaning of the sentence. Make your tone reflect a sincere statement or a question. Notice how the meaning can be completely different just by focusing on a single word. Every man has had the experience of arguing with a woman in his life over a simple subject. Because men tend to use words as tools, and women tend to use words for understanding and relationship building, they hear the same words differently. For example, she might become angry or hurt at something he said. He will respond by saying, "But I just said such and such." She will reply angrily, "It wasn't what you said, it was the way you said it." By deliberately changing your tone of voice and being aware of how important it is, you can change the entire message and the subsequent effect it has on your listeners. Moravian also found that fully 55% of the message is contained in the speaker's body language. This is because there are 22 times as many nerves from the eye to the brain as from the ear to the brain. For this reason, visual impressions are very powerful. Be aware of your style of communication. Excellent communicators always pay attention to the effect their body language has on the level of acceptance of the message they're trying to convey. When your arms hang loosely at your side with your palms outward and open, and you look directly at the audience with a smile as you speak, your listeners relax and absorb your message like a sponge absorbs water. If your face is serious and unsmiling, with your arms folded or gripping the lectern, your listeners respond as if an angry parent is scolding them. They close up and become defensive, resisting your message and your attempt to persuade them to think and act in a particular way. Body language is very important. Because I've given so many talks to so many audiences, speakers continually ask me for my comments on a talk or a seminar that they have just delivered. I'm always reluctant to give critical feedback because people in general seem to be hypersensitive to comments that are not glowing and positive. Nonetheless, it's amazing how often I give the same piece of advice. Slow down, pause, and smile between your points and sentences. It's equally amazing how many speakers take this advice and notice an immediate and positive difference in the way their audiences respond to them. When you slow down, your words are clearer and you appear more articulate. Your tone of voice is more pleasant and enjoyable. And when you smile, you radiate warmth, friendliness, and acceptance. This causes your audience to relax and become more open to your message. We'll talk more about this in Chapter 8. There's a simple 3-part structure that you can use to design any speech. You can use this model for a 1-minute talk or for a 30-minute talk. Part 1 is the opening. You simply tell the audience what you are going to say in your speech. For example, you could say, "Thank you for being here. In the next few minutes, I want to tell you about the 3 problems facing our industry today and the actions we can take to turn them to our advantage in the months ahead." This opening sets the stage, prepares the audience, and gives your speech a track to run on. The second part is to tell them what you promised in the opening. This can consist of 1, 2, or 3 points. If it's a short speech, it should only include 3 key points developed in a sequence. For example, you might say, "We are facing increased competition, shrinking profit margins, and changing customer tastes. Let us look at each of these in order and consider alternate ways of dealing with them effectively." The third part of speaking is a summary of what you just told the audience. You should never expect your listeners to memorize everything that you have said the first time they hear it. Looking back, summarizing and repeating is helpful and enjoyable for your audience. For example, you could say, "To summarize, to deal with increased competition, we must improve the quality of our offerings and the speed at which we deliver them to our customers. To deal with shrinking markets, we must expand into new markets and increase our product offerings to attract new customers. To deal with changing customer tastes, We must develop and market products and services that our customers want today rather than what they may have wanted in the past. With our joint commitment to these 3 goals, we will not only survive, but thrive in the exciting times ahead. Thank you. You have a job to do. Peggy Noonan, speechwriter for Ronald Reagan, once wrote, "Every speech has a job to do." One of the most important things you must do before you speak is to start with the end in mind. Determine what you want your talk to accomplish. Ask yourself what I call the objective question. If they interviewed people after my talk and asked them, "What did you get from this speech and what are you going to do differently as a result?" what would I want them to say? Everything in your speech, from your opening through the body to your closing remarks, should aim at achieving this goal. When I work with corporate clients, I ask them the objective question. I also ask them why they are inviting me to speak and what objective or objectives they want me to accomplish with their audience. We then discuss and agree on exactly how we want the audience to think, feel, and act after the talk or seminar. Once we are both clear, I will then design the talk or seminar from beginning to end to ensure that we achieve that result. You can do the same. Here is a complex structure for longer speeches. In designing a longer talk, there's a more complex structure that you can use. It consists of the following 8 parts, each of which I will develop and explain in the pages ahead. Number 1 is the opening. The purpose of the opening is to get the audience's attention, build expectations, and focus listeners on the speaker. There is no point in talking if no one is listening or paying attention. 2, the introduction. This is where you tell the audience what is coming and why it is important. 3, the first point. This is where you transition from the introduction into the body of your talk. Your first point sets the stage and begins to deliver on your initial promise. Stage 4 is the transition into the next point. You must make it clear that you have finished with one point and are now moving on to another. This is an art in and of itself. 5, the second key point. This point should follow logically from your first point. Step 6 is another transition. Here you make it clear that you are moving onward to another subject, like shifting gears. 7 is the third key point. This flows naturally from the first 2 points and begins moving you toward the end of your talk. And finally, point 8 is the summary. This is your conclusion and call to action. In Chapter 2, you will learn how to organize and develop your talk so that you achieve each of these goals in the proper order and sequence. In learning to speak effectively, there is no substitute for practice, especially practicing aloud. Over the years, I've observed hundreds of talks given by both amateurs and professionals, and you can always tell when they have been practiced thoroughly beforehand. Speaking with power and presence. The popular author Elbert Hubbard was once asked how one became a writer. He replied, "The only way to learn to write is to write and write and write and write and write and write and write." Likewise, to learn the art of speaking, the only way to learn to speak is to speak and speak and speak and speak and speak and speak and speak. Learning to speak is like learning any other skill. It requires practice and repetition until you have mastered the ability to communicate and persuade. One of the best ways to improve your speaking style and ability is to recite poetry aloud. Memorize a poem that you enjoy, one with a great story and wonderful lines, and then recite it over and over again. Each time you recite this poem aloud, put energy and passion into your voice. Vary the rhythm and tone and emphasis on the various words. Imagine that you are auditioning for a major role in a big-budget movie that will make you rich and famous. Deliver the lines of this poem as though it is extremely important that you connect emotionally and enthusiastically with the listener. When you read good poetry, you not only learn how to develop sentences, but you also learn how to use a wider variety of words to make your points more effectively. The rule is this: people will forget what you said, but they will remember how you said it. As you change the emphasis from word to word and from sentence to sentence, you develop an almost musical ability to speak in such a way that listeners are caught up in your message. Another great exercise is to read Shakespeare, especially the famous monologues from Hamlet, Macbeth, Julius Caesar, and Romeo and Juliet. When you read these wonderful monologues and soliloquies, you expand your command of language and your competence in rhetoric and persuasion. One of the very best ways to become a better speaker is to listen to as many other speakers as possible. Take notes. Observe how they walk, talk, move, and gesture. Observe how an experienced speaker opens a talk, transitions into the body of the talk, uses examples, illustrations, and humor, and wraps up the talk, and then concludes her time with the audience. Make a list of the points you want to observe from the opening to the close, and give the speaker a grade of 1 to 10 for each of those points. Think about how he or she could have done things better, and how you could do it better yourself. Listen to some of the best speeches ever given, many of which are available on CD. Play them over and over and notice how the speaker uses logos, ethos, and pathos to persuade the listener to think, feel, and act differently. So let's summarize this chapter. The wonderful thing about communication is that you cannot get worse at it by doing it. To master the arts of speaking and rhetoric, you must be prepared to learn and practice over and over again for months and even years. There are no shortcuts. It's also important to remember that preparation is what separates mediocrity from greatness. So spend time developing your logic, planning your words, and working toward your goal for your audience. And practice. Every new line of poetry that you remember and recite, every monologue that you deliver aloud, every speaker that you observe and critique increases your ability to become an excellent speaker yourself. There are no limits. Chapter 2. Planning and Preparation Made Simple. The true worth of a man is to be measured in the objects he pursues. Marcus Aurelius. Fully 90% of your success as a speaker will be determined by how well you plan your speech. Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "You must know 10 words for every word you write, or the reader will know that this is not a true thing." In speaking, however, you must read and research 100 words for every word you speak, or the listener will know that you are speaking off the top of your head. The listeners will immediately sense that you lack a depth of knowledge in your subject unless you are not only prepared, but over-prepared. Poor preparation before an intelligent, discerning audience automatically downgrades your credibility, your ethos. If you are unprepared, or even worse, if you tell listeners that you are not an expert on this subject, they immediately turn off to your message, no matter how good it is. So start with audience demographics and characteristics. The starting point of preparation is your audience. Remember, it's not about you, it's about them. Begin as if you were a market researcher and you are determined to understand your customers fully. Who are they exactly? Who will be in the audience? This is the key to an effective talk and to excellent preparation. Here are some demographic particulars that you can use to tailor your speeches. First, age and age range. How old are your audience members and what are their age ranges? Younger audiences have different understandings, different cultural knowledge, and different backgrounds from older audiences. Knowing their age is very important. What is the gender mix in your audience? Sometimes my audiences will be 50-50, males and females. Sometimes my audiences will be 95% men or 95% women. This gender breakdown will influence how you design your remarks and make your points. What are the incomes of the people in your audiences? How much do they earn on average? What is their income range from the lowest to the highest? In particular, how do they earn their incomes, and what influences those incomes? Knowing this can help you to refer to money and income-related topics in a way that is more acceptable to more of your listeners. What is the educational background of the people in your audience? Are they high school graduates? Are they university graduates? Do they have liberal arts degrees or engineering degrees? Knowing the type of education your listeners have helps you to choose relevant examples, illustrations, and vocabulary. What do your audience members do for a living? How long have they been working in their particular fields? What is happening in their particular fields today? Is this a boom time or a bust time for the work that they do? What is the family status of your audience? Are audience members married, single, divorced, or widowed? Are they mostly married or mostly single? Do most have children? These are essential facts for you to discover. And finally, what is the audience's familiarity with your subject? How much does it already know about what you will be saying? Are audience members beginners or are they somewhat knowledgeable? This will decide how complex or simple you make your talk. Now, psychographically, you need to ask some questions as well. How do they think? Analyze what your audience members think by asking these questions. What are their goals and aspirations? What are their hopes and fears as they relate to your subject? What needs do they have that you can fulfill with your comments and your ideas? What are their values and beliefs? What is their political orientation? What sort of religious feelings or commitments do they have? What are their worries, concerns, or problems? Understanding the emotional context people bring to your talk can be very helpful in connecting with them. Asking meeting planners these questions in advance and studying their websites and published materials will help you to get the answers you need. It's also important to understand what dreams or goals or ideas unite your audience. Let me give you an example. I speak to many audiences of sales professionals, entrepreneurs, business owners, and network marketers. The common denominator is that they all want to be financially successful. Therefore, everything I talk about relates to how they can use certain ideas to increase their incomes and their profitability. As a result of taking this approach, my audiences lean forward, listen closely to every word I speak, and often give me standing ovations. You can do the same. Once when I was booked to speak for a large national corporation that sold its products through retailers and distributors across the country, I was brought in to speak just after the organization's executives had made a major announcement. The announcement was that in 30 days the company was going to begin selling its products directly to customers, and it was going to do so at the same prices that the salespeople would be offering. The difference was that the company would credit the sales commissions it would normally pay to its salespeople back to the customers if they bought directly from the factory. Well, as you can imagine, the salespeople in the audience were in a mild state of shock. Their entire lives and incomes were dependent upon the commissions they earned from selling through the distributor network. Now, with the change in company policy, the distributor network could purchase directly from the company at the same prices or with commissions credited back. The salespeople had had the chair kicked out from underneath them. The company brought me in and paid my fee to motivate the salespeople to go out and work harder in any case, even though their primary source of income had been dramatically diminished. I still remember looking out at the audience. They looked stunned and unbelieving. They looked at me as though I were an enemy, conjured up by the corporation to smooth over what the company had just done to hurt them in their pocketbooks. Because I knew all of this, I was at least prepared to speak effectively to an unresponsive, and in many cases, negative audience. It pays to take the time to find out what is going on in the company or group. Do your homework. Go beyond demographics and personality traits. When you're speaking to people in a specific industry, business association, or other organization, you must find out everything you can about what is going on professionally with those people before you get up to speak. Is the market good or bad for what they are selling? Are they growing, staying flat, or are they declining in the current market? What are the business and political trends that are affecting them at this moment? Here are some of the other things to check on when planning a speech or presentation. Consider what's happening in their businesses. I was once called in to speak to a large group of managers of a major multinational corporation. The company had just announced a series of layoffs of managers at all levels, and I was speaking to the survivors. However, just before I arrived to give my talk on personal productivity and leadership effectiveness, the company announced even more management layoffs and that many of the people in the audience would be cut within the next 30 days. As a result, my audience was less than responsive and enthusiastic. The only thing that listeners could think of while I was talking was that they might be next. This is not a good situation, but it's essential that you know about it. Take the time to find out. Find out what the local environment is like. Know what is going on in the city in which you are speaking. For example, in several cases I've spoken in cities where the local team either won or lost a championship within the last day or two. It's important that you be aware of this and that you mention it in your introductory remarks. Otherwise, the audience will often be preoccupied with the sporting event and will feel that you are an outsider who does not know or understand them. Keep in mind who else they've heard lately. Another part of preparation is to learn about your audience's other experiences with speakers. Who else has spoken to this audience and on what subjects? Did they like what they heard? Were they disappointed with a previous speaker? If so, why? If they liked the previous speaker, what was the reason? What did he or she say? At a longer meeting, it's important to know who will be speaking before you. What subjects will they speak on? You should also know who spoke to the audience at the last meeting and how the audience reacted to those speeches. Tailor your talk to the audience's specific concerns. Recently, I was speaking to a group of about 4,000 people. I spent considerable time preparing my remarks based on in-depth discussions with the key meeting organizers. As a result, my 90-minute talk wove all the main company themes, concerns, competitive challenges, and future directions into a single fabric. After the talk, the president of the company took me aside and told me that this was one of the best talks she had ever heard. The company had hired previous speakers at high rates who had promised to customize and tailor their remarks to the audience, but had made no effort at all to do so. She said it was immediately obvious when they began speaking that they had spent little time incorporating the company's concerns into their speeches. As a result, they were never invited back. Start with the end in mind. Remember the objective question. If you could interview the audience participants afterwards and ask, "What did you learn from my talk, and what are you going to do differently as a result?" what would you want them to say? The more specific you can be regarding your answer to this question, the easier it will be for you to design and structure your remarks so that you achieve this objective in the time allotted. Watch the clock. In addition, you must be absolutely clear about the amount of time you have and the expected structure of the talk. Sometimes audiences expect you to speak for 75% of the time and then conduct a question and answer session afterwards. In other cases, the meeting planner will want you to speak for the whole time. In either case, it is important that you end exactly when you say you will. Many talks, conferences, and meetings are carefully choreographed with regard to time. For example, I was once invited to give a talk at a meeting of 5,000 people. The meeting planners were so fastidious that they asked me to write out the talk in detail, word for word, and then they paid me to present my talk to a small group of executives who would advise me and comment on the talk. Their primary concern was the exact number of minutes I would use. When I gave the talk, the speaker before me, who had been allocated 22 minutes, spoke for 28 minutes. As I stood behind the stage waiting for my turn to go on, I noticed that the meeting planners were beside themselves with stress, anxiety, and anger. They did not even care what the speaker said. All they cared about was that he was complicating their schedule by speaking longer than he had promised. He was never invited back. Once you've done your homework, prepare. There's a powerful method of preparation that I have used over the years. I start with a clean sheet of paper. I write the title of my talk at the top. I then write a one-sentence description of the purpose or objective of the talk. What is the job it has to do? Then, I discipline myself to do what I call a down dump of every single idea, insight, phrase, statistic, example, or illustration that I could possibly use in the talk. I write and write and write and write and write. Sometimes I end up with 2 or 3 pages of notes. From these notes, I will then begin selecting particular elements and putting them in a logical sequence so that they make up a talk that flows from beginning to end. You can do the same. It's amazing how many ideas you will come up with when you force yourself to write 20 or 30 or 50 points that you feel would be appropriate for a talk. Once you have all these points organized, go back through with a red pen and circle the points that would have the greatest impact in your talk. Organize these points in sequence, and you will see your talk start to form naturally. Use the PREP formula, P-R-E-P. Once you've chosen your points, you can use what is called the PREP formula for each point that you want to make in your presentation. P stands for point of view. State your idea, thought, or fact at the beginning. For example, you could say, more people are going to make more money in the next 10 years than in the last 100 years. R in the PREP formula stands for reasons. State your reasons for holding this point of view or idea. For example, you might say, the number of millionaires and billionaires, most of them self-made in one generation, has increased by 60% in the last 5 years, and the rate of increase is accelerating. The third letter in the formula, E, stands for example. Illustrate, reinforce, or prove your point of view. For example, you could say, in 1900 there were 5,000 millionaires in America and no billionaires. By the year 2000, there were 5 million millionaires and more than 500 billionaires. By 2007, according to Businessweek magazine, there were 8,900,000 millionaires in the United States and over 700 billionaires worldwide, most of them first generation. And finally, the last P is you restate your point of view. Restate the first P to emphasize your idea. For example, you might say, there have never been more opportunities for you, the creative minority, to achieve financial success than exist today, except for tomorrow and the years ahead. The PREP formula in action. Here's an example of how the PREP formula comes together. This is the very best time in human history to be alive. The point of view. We have the highest rate of home ownership, the lowest level of unemployment, and the fastest growing economy in the industrialized world. Reasons for your point of view. Last year alone, more than 1 million Americans started their own businesses and launched onto the seas of entrepreneurship to take advantage of the current economy. That's the example. Because this is such a great time, more people are going to make more money in the years ahead than in the last 100 years put together, which restates your point of view. You can organize every key point of your talk using this simple formula. It is incredibly powerful and influential in persuading your audience to accept your message. The windshield wiper method. You can use the windshield wiper method as well in designing your talk. As you know, you have both a right brain and a left brain. Your left brain is activated by facts and information. Your right brain is activated by feelings, stories, quotes, and examples. The way you use this method is simple. You state a fact and follow it with a story. State another fact and follow it with a quote. State another fact and follow it with an example. State a fact and follow it with a numerical illustration. You go back and forth, like a windshield wiper. To use this method of preparation, take a sheet of paper and draw a line down the center. On the left side of the line, you write the fact or point that you wish to make. On the right side, you write the example, story, or illustration that proves or demonstrates the fact. For each item on the left-hand column, you have a fact or story on the right-hand column. When you give a talk using this method, you will activate both the left and right brains of everyone in your audience. They will lean forward and hang on every word. You will keep them totally engaged the entire time. The circles method. To plan your talk on paper, you can use a picture or a visual illustration. What I do is draw a series of 5 large circles down the center of a page. Each circle represents an element of the talk. The first circle will be the introduction and the comments that I will use to get attention and to set the stage. The second, third, and fourth circles will be the key points that I intend to make. The fifth circle will be the wrap-up and the close. If I'm giving a longer talk, I sometimes have 7 circles down the page, and I even use another page if necessary. In each case, the first and last circles are my opening and closing. The middle circles are the key points I plan to make in an orderly sequence. Planning your speech's opening is important. Plan your opening word for word and rehearse it over and over again in your mind, aloud, and in front of a mirror. Your opening comments set the stage, build expectations, and communicate a clear message to your audience. They must not be left to chance. You should plan your closing comments word for word as well. Think about exactly what you are going to say to wrap up your talk. If for any reason your speech length is cut back because of changes in the schedule, at least you know how to end your talk in an effective way. Planning the visual part of your speech. In the course of giving your talk, you should think about the visual elements that you can use to illustrate your points and to make them come alive for the audience. Try the magic wand technique. One of these elements is what I call the magic wand technique. As I'm speaking, I will take a gold pen out of my pocket and say something that incorporates the pen, such as, "Imagine that you could wave a magic wand over this situation and make it perfect in every way. What would it look like?" I wave the magic wand, my pen, and pause to allow each person to imagine what this situation would look like if it was perfect. I then discuss a series of strategies and techniques that the listeners can use to improve their current situation. PowerPoint in speaking. Whether you use PowerPoint depends upon many factors. In the professional speaking industry, there's an expression, death by PowerPoint. Many speakers have started to rely on PowerPoint presentations so heavily that their personalities and the essence of their talks get lost as they go from point to point on the screen. If you're going to use PowerPoint, which can be ideal in certain situations, it's best to follow a few rules. The first is the 5x5 rule. First and foremost, you should never have more than 5 lines on a slide, and each line should never have more than 5 words. Any more than this can distract and even confuse your audience. With a smaller room or group, you can use more lines or words than the rule permits. Regardless of how many points you use, bring them up one at a time as you are commenting on them. Don't make the mistake of bringing up the entire slide full of information so that the audience is busy reading and not paying attention to you. Not long ago, when I spoke for a multinational company, the president spoke to the audience for an hour before it was my turn to speak. His PowerPoint presentation consisted of a single slide with hundreds of numbers in rows and columns, none of which were clear to anybody in the audience. He spoke to the screen, commenting on the numbers for a full hour. Because he was the president, everyone in the audience sat politely, but it was excruciatingly painful for all the participants. Don't let this happen to you. Second, face the audience when you use PowerPoint. You should have your laptop in front of you, illustrating what is appearing on the screen behind you. As you click through your PowerPoint presentation, keep your eyes on the audience members and speak to them the whole time. When you're not referring to a point on the screen, push the B on your laptop to blank out the screen. Remember, your face is the most important element in any presentation, and while there are words on the screen, people's eyes will be darting from your face to the screen and back again, like spectators at a tennis game. When you use PowerPoint, it is essential that your face be well lit throughout. I am continually dismayed at the number of times that I see senior executives allow themselves to be put in the dark in order to ensure maximum clarity for the projector and the screen. The senior executive, who has often traveled a great distance and invested a good deal of time in this presentation, is often standing there in the dark, difficult for the audience to see or to relate to. Only use PowerPoint as a prop or as a support. It should not be the main focus of the talk. You are the main focus of the presentation, and PowerPoint is there merely to assist you and to illustrate your points more clearly to your audience. When you use PowerPoint, practice and rehearse. Go through a dry run 3 to 5 times before you make your presentation. Do a complete dress rehearsal on the stage to ensure that the PowerPoint and projector are properly hooked up and working smoothly before you begin. You've probably seen situations where the entire talk is built around PowerPoint and then the PowerPoint somehow fails to function. The speaker stands up, begins clicking, and nothing happens. People come running up on the stage to tinker with the machine to try to fix it. They call the technician from somewhere else in the hotel. The entire seminar or presentation grinds to a halt while everyone stands around the stage looking sheepish and foolish. Doing a complete run-through before your presentation will help ensure that this won't happen to you. In any case, when you use PowerPoint, start off with a strong, clear statement that sets the stage for your talk. You can then use PowerPoint to illustrate critical numbers, points, and relationships. When you have finished using PowerPoint, blank out the screen and be sure to end with a strong focus on your face and your verbal message. Planning a smooth delivery. Every speaker has 3 talks for a particular occasion. First, there is the talk that the speaker plans to give. Second, there is the talk that the speaker actually gives when he stands up in front of the audience. And third, there is the talk that the speaker wishes he had given as he thinks about it afterward on the way home. The very best talk of all is when the talk you planned, the talk you gave, and the talk you wish you had given all turn out to be the same. This gives you a deep sense of pleasure and satisfaction. In planning and preparing your talk, design your transitions from point to point so that it is clear to the audience that you have finished with one point and you are moving on to the next. Go over your materials repeatedly and continually look for ways to improve the quality and smooth delivery of your message. Practice pays off. Some years ago, I was commissioned to give an important talk to an audience containing people who could book me as a speaker if they were sufficiently impressed. I therefore spent an inordinate amount of time practicing, preparing, and rehearsing my speech, finally reviewing the speech about 50 times before I stood up and gave it to the huge audience at the convention center. The practice paid off. The speech was recorded on both video and audio tape. It was distributed worldwide and was eventually viewed by tens of thousands of people in multiple languages. Some years later, this speech was rated as one of the 12 best speeches ever given out of more than 1,000 speeches to this particular organization over a 37-year period. Preparation really paid off. Use memory techniques. Another way that you can prepare yourself to give a great speech is to use a mnemonic. This is where you design your talk in your mind around a particular phrase or series of letters or numbers. You've probably heard of the mnemonic that is used by most memory trainers. They will use the word 1 to rhyme with the word gun. When they think of their first point, they think of their opening statement coming out of a gun. They will use the word 2 to rhyme with the word shoe. They will then think of their second point as if it were coming out of a shoe, or under a shoe, or associated with a shoe in some way. In a like manner, the word 3 rhymes with tree, and the speaker will think of his or her third point as hanging from the branches of a tree. The word 4 rhymes with door, and the speaker will think of his fourth point as though it were posted on a door. The word 5 rhymes with the word hive, and the speaker will think of his or her fifth point buzzing around a beehive, and so on. 6 rhymes with sticks. 7 rhymes with heaven. 8 rhymes with gate. 9 rhymes with tine, as in a dinner fork. And 10 rhymes with hen. In each case, by imagining the number and its rhyming symbol, you can connect a part of your talk to it, and thus remember 10 points in a row without missing a beat. This is a common trick used by speakers who want to stand in front of an audience and speak without notes. Design your talk with a word. My favorite way of organizing a talk is to build it around a word that is relevant to the talk and important to the audience, such as the word success. You can do this with almost any word, but here's an example of this method of organizing. In success, the first letter S stands for sense of purpose. I then explain the importance of having clear, specific goals before you begin any undertaking. The second letter U stands for you are responsible. I explain that you must take charge of your career and your life, and you must refuse to make any excuses. The third letter C stands for customer satisfaction. You must clearly identify your ideal customer, decide what you can do to win her over, and satisfy her better than your competitor can. The fourth letter C stands for creativity. I explain the importance of finding better, faster, cheaper ways to promote and sell your product in today's market. The fifth letter E stands for excellence. You must become absolutely excellent at what you do and continually strive to improve. The sixth letter S stands for sensitivity to others. You must think about other people and how what you do and say can have an effect on them. And finally, the last letter in this example, S, stands for stick to it. You must resolve in advance that you will never give up and that you will persist in the face of all adversity and difficulties. Using this word and elaborating on each letter, I've been able to speak without notes for 60 or 90 minutes and never lose my place. The audience loves it and looks forward eagerly to the meaning of each letter as I explain it. You can use this method with a 3-letter word or a 10-letter word. It's an effective way to organize your thoughts and impress your audience by speaking fluently without notes. Put your points on index cards. If you're using a podium, one of the best preparation techniques is to put your key points onto 3x5 inch or 5x8 inch index cards in large letters. Rather than writing out your material word for word, write out key sentences, ideas, and phrases, and then shuffle the index cards from one to the next as you speak. I've seen quite competent and highly respected speakers stand in front of a large audience with several index cards in their hands, using them as props as they give their talk to the audience. The audience seldom objects to this method of presentation. They all know that this is how the speaker is keeping his thoughts organized. They also recognize that the speaker has done considerable preparation to reach this point. Give your talk to small groups first. One way that you can prepare is to give your talk to smaller, friendlier groups as many times as possible before you get in front of a larger, less personal audience. Not long ago, I attended a board meeting that was to be followed by a major dinner. One of the board members began speaking extemporaneously about a particular subject. Because he was so well organized, the entire board listened to him as he spoke and developed his theme, point by point, for 20 minutes. At the end, everybody was impressed with his thoughts and ideas. That evening, in front of 500 people at the dinner, he stood up and gave the identical speech he had given at the boardroom table. I only realized in retrospect that the board meeting had been his final dry run for what turned out to be a very important and consequential talk to a large group of important people. One way many people prepare for a talk is to go for a walk and give the talk as they go. As they walk along, they use their hands and faces and develop the talk. They use a mnemonic so that they can remember every part without notes. Some even raise their voices on certain points and pretend that they're speaking loudly to people in a large audience. Walking and talking is one of the most effective ways to prepare for a speech. Google the information you need. When you are speaking to a specific industry group, it's important that you at least appear well-informed, if not an expert. You can achieve this by using Google to find all the information available on that industry. You can also go to hoovers.com and look up industry statistics and trends, the major players in an industry, and the major events taking place in that industry group. When you weave this inside information into your talk to a specific group, you sound like an insider. You sound like someone who works in the industry, if not somewhere in the company. People are greatly impressed by a speaker who seems to know a lot about what they do for a living and the challenges they are facing in the current marketplace. Research the key people. Finally, one of your best forms of preparation is to find out about the key people in the organization that has asked you to speak. Look up their biographies on the Internet. If a key person works for a corporation, her biography is often on the company website. Sometimes You can ask the meeting planners for background information on the key people who are in the audience. When I speak to a group, I make it a point to learn the names and backgrounds of the key people. And then I weave their names into my talk as I go along. I will say something like, "You've probably heard Ralph Wilson make this point many times, that you have to persist in the face of all adversity. That's the sort of thing that he believes in, and that's the reason for the success of this organization." I can confidently say that I have never been contradicted afterward. When you put positive words, thoughts, and ideas into the mouths of the key people in your audience, they will always be flattered and happy as a result, and you will look like a hero. So here's the summary of this chapter. People often ask me what the secret is to effective public speaking. I always tell them that it starts with preparation. Fully 90% of your success as a speaker will be determined by how well and how thoroughly you prepare. Within a few minutes of opening your mouth, the audience will know how well you have prepared and either grade you up or grade you down. Your job is to prepare and over-prepare so that you sound like an authority from the first moment you begin to speak. The best news is that the more you plan and prepare, the more confidence you will have when you finally stand up to speak. When you have finished practicing your talk over and over again, you will feel a tremendous sense of personal power and calmness when you finally stand before an audience.